So sometimes there's going to be scenarios where like the things that could get you the best lift in conversion is going to need product development. And oftentimes, teams are running lean and there's not a lot of time or maybe even buy-in from the developer side to be able to, accommodate what's being asked for. I started off my internet marketing journey as an SEO and self-taught PPC and UX, because back in the mid 2000s, there wasn't really kind of formal training for this. Everybody was just on forums and digesting as much as you could and, figuring it out on the fly. CRO as an industry and as like a career choice for people has kind of blossomed. So now there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn sharing like their own test stuff, their own like methodologies and covering different angles of it. So it's really nice to see like there's wide coverage in the industry and a lot of information and a lot of sharing. Being able to have the soft skills around, how to know when to push for your idea and push back on the pushback and really hold your ground versus being flexible and letting go around it. I think those things are things that we can continually practice. There's always something that affects like SEO, mobile page load speed. Like Google is making changes right now as we speak to things like how they measure performance and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a CRO, you need to be aware of some of the technical stuff and how that might impact page speed or SEO, which all flows into the conversion equation. If you're using AI within your personalization tools or with your conversion optimization tools, there's going to be more and more generative stuff out of your Photoshop and out of your no-code tools and stuff. So I think those are good trends to kind of get at least your hands dirty and play around with them and get to know the tools. But the front end stuff I would leave for probably 3 to 5 years.
Welcome to another episode of the Women in CRO series by VWO podcast. This series is an ode to the contribution of women in the CRO industry. Before we speak to our special guest for this episode, here's a quick summary of who we are and what we do. VWO is a leading experience optimization platform that helps fast-growing brands optimize their digital experiences. Using our latest product, VWO Insights, you can understand user journeys and identify conversion roadblocks on your website and mobile app. So, without any further delay, let's jump right into the conversation.
Hi, everybody. In today's episode, we have Linda Bustos, founder of Adjacent and eCom Ideas. Linda is a seasoned e-commerce entrepreneur and content creator with over 2 decades of experience. Linda founded Adjacent and eCom Ideas, specializing in e-commerce consulting. She has also led pivotal roles at corporategifting.com, and Linda is known for her thought leadership, speaking at global events and contributing to publications like Forbes. A staunch advocate for women in technology, Linda has been recognized for her influence and leadership. So join us as we explore Linda's journey and insights about CRO. Hi, Linda. So how are you? And welcome to the VWO podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Jinal.
How is your day going?
Sunny here, so I can't complain.
No worries. So what inspired your career in e-commerce optimization, and how was your journey, or how is your journey so far?
Well, so my background is I've been blogging about e-commerce since 2006. I started off my internet marketing journey as an SEO and self-taught PPC and UX, because back in the mid 2000s, there wasn't really, kind of formal training for this. Everybody was just on forums and digesting as much as you could and, figuring it out on the fly. So I was very into and influenced by like Jacob Nielsen's publications and Jared Spool. And there were a lot of like UX thought leaders that were doing lab experiments and user research, like one-on-one in real time, and publishing those findings out there. And that's what everybody else, in the community was picking up. And that ended up turning into like what we now would call like a heuristic evaluation. But that was before things like Visual Website Optimizer and the other tools that like enabled you to actually do experiments live on your site for your your own context. It was like you had to kind of rely on these big behind the curtain, massive research things to like disseminate the information. So as a blogger through that, like around 2008, 2009 time, once the tools started becoming available and people like Brian Eisenberg and Chris Goward from Wider Funnel and stuff started actually becoming these practitioners, that like was naturally became part of my blogging, because I'd always been writing about like e-commerce UX. And then that was just like the next step on the evolution, is that CRO becomes a part of that. And then I got the chance to like do some hands-on CRO stuff as part of my role at Elastic Path as well. So that's kind of how I got into it.
You're still doing that. So it's been like almost 2 decades, nearly 2 decades it would touch, right? Like if we count 2008 and like in 2028, it would be like almost 2 decades.
Yeah,
That's
I took some time out of that to, when I went back into the corporate world and did some other roles, I stopped writing about it, but I really missed writing about it. So I kind of felt like I wanted to get back in, and it makes you a lot more part of the community as well than when you're, just focusing on your own internal stuff.
it's a sense of like giving back things to people who are really willing to learn from the way you have learned from others. You are just trying to contribute back to the community, which is still trying to grow. So it's indeed a great contribution because it takes a lot of energy in writing, thinking. Apart from writing, I think the background ideas and like UX and all that. So it's entire journey, I guess it's like completely a different one.
Yeah. And it was nice after having taken a few years out and kind of not being on the scene to come back and see that like CRO as an industry and as like a career choice for people has kind of blossomed. So there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn sharing like their own test stuff, their own like methodologies, and covering different angles of it. So it's really nice to see like there's wide coverage in the industry and a lot of information and a lot of sharing.
Yes, and these days, especially people are writing more about losses as well, and like what are their setbacks when they try to induce CRO into different brands. So that makes it more interesting that hey, there are others as well into the same world facing same problems. So that again becomes very interesting to know that how people are also struggling. There will be definitely struggle in different fields, but yes, it feels good when people are writing, and like our thoughts were also there, but then someone has written that out, so it also matches the pain and gain as well, both.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And based on your experience, like helping online companies with CRO, what are the biggest challenges like business faces when it comes to like improving their conversion rates?
Ooh, I could give you about 25 answers of it because there's a lot of different, there's a lot of moving parts. I think one of the big challenges for CRO in general is that like you can test very small things and get, small wins. And that's not as exciting, right? As, really being able to move the needle. And when you're talking about e-commerce, you're always trying to solve customers' pain. Like the biggest gain that you're going to get is like the biggest pain that you solve. And oftentimes that's going to involve development. So depending on the client, like if we want to talk about like CRO agency client relationship, that's not necessarily the same one in the same team. You've got the CRO experts that are looking at the product or the project or the whole scenario from here's what we have and here's what we could do and apply to the site to squeeze a little bit more juice out of it. But sometimes that stuff doesn't exist, or making that change affects the actual product underneath. And now you've got a client with a development system and a team of developers where their day-to-day job is putting out the fires, keeping the system stable, protecting the code, and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes there's going to be scenarios where like the things that could get you the best lift in conversion is going to need product development. And sometimes that means waiting. When you're on the CRO agency side, you need to wait for the clients to be able to fit that in to their development backlog. And oftentimes, teams are running lean and there's not a lot of time or maybe even buy-in from the developer side to be able to, accommodate what's being asked for from a third party. So I think that's one of the challenges. And then that can kind of force the CRO to stay within the box of like little CSS things that they can do on the front end without touching code and without, interrupting anything, which can lead to a series of kind of safe tests that get like a marginal or a null result or even like a loss. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is just that it spans not just the front end side, but it touches the development side as well.
Got it. Entire cycle and then buy-in from people matters the most in order to make our like roadmap to success map. Because after all, like if it doesn't get implemented, it would still be a tested idea and not into a converted product idea. How do you feed ideas if there are tests that win? There's like no further explanation needed for most of the parties. But then if a test fails, how do you try to tackle, and what are the learnings that you try to take them forward?
Conversion optimization is kind of a hybrid of a bunch of different things, right? You have to think like a marketer. You have to be intuitive. You have to have a lot of empathy for the customer. You have to know about statistics and have some critical thinking to apply to something. You have to know enough about the web and where the web is going and a little bit of technical stuff. So it kind of turns into a Swiss Army knife. And that's why we have teams for CRO where people can specialize in certain things. But CRO is like a very exciting career or like thing to double down and specialize in, because you get to apply a lot of creativity. But if you want to get into this industry, make sure that you absolutely love self-educating and keeping up with the moving target that's going on all the time. There's always something that affects like SEO, mobile page load speed. Like Google is making changes right now as we speak to things like how they measure performance and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a CRO, you need to be aware of some of the technical stuff and how that might impact page speed or SEO, which all flows into the conversion equation. So yeah, my advice would be to pick a few people maybe outside of your area of expertise to follow. Pick someone in SEO, pick someone in social ads, pick somebody in psychology and user behavior and maybe even development. And that will make you a very well-rounded person. You don't have to be the expert, but as long as you're aware and you can speak to those things and keep them in context when you're making decisions, it will make you a much more well-rounded CRO.
That's great. Yes. And indeed, it's kind of a package of like multiple like skill set that we would not need to master, but at least we would need to have some knowledge about them so that at the end they don't hamper our own program when we are executing it out.
Yeah. And I think the other part of it is like focus on soft skills, because this is an industry where it's a little bit of art and science. So, we always come with a hypothesis that might have a little bit of gut feel, might have a little bit of, I think this could work. And it can be deflating when other people push back because they see the world slightly differently, or they have a little bit of experience, or maybe, going back to what we talked about developers, sometimes they have some knowledge about technical implications or consequences of doing something a certain way. So being able to have the soft skills around, how to know when to push for your idea and push back on the pushback and really hold your ground versus being flexible and letting go around it. I think those things are things that we can continually practice.
Yes, we should be at the end accommodative when it's needed and shouldn't totally lose the hopes. But yes, we should be able to accommodate no to the ideas, and trying to understand why there was a no is also important so that we can fit into the shoes of customer who is trying to push back or understand their pain as well. I think that is also going to be important for the practitioners over here.
Yep. And if you're an agency or you're outside of the core team and if you're working with people who are product managers, a really great book to read is called Managing Product Equals Managing Tension. It's a book out there that somebody wrote. You can get it on, ebook. But I think it's really always a good idea to have empathy for the people that are managing the product, because they are, beholden to a whole bunch of stakeholders, including marketing, maybe the CEO, maybe the chief technical officer, maybe sales. So they have to, answer to a lot of people. And then, you get a CRO agency, now they're answering to the CRO agency as well. So it's definitely
Yes.
good to, kind of, practice that and just be able to put the hat on of other people on the team.
Yes, that's true. And then how's your experience? Like, can businesses foster inclusivity for women in experimentation and optimization?
Yeah, I think inclusivity, there's two ways to look at it. Like, number one is just getting a seat at the table to begin with, right? So hiring or inclusivity is kind of something that a company has to believe in and incorporate into their values. But then when you get into the team dynamic, like very similar to what we just talked about, is that there's day-to-day interactions where you can feel not included by not being heard within a team, within a group. So I think for inclusivity, like, if you are in a management role or in a leadership role across, where CRO falls into, so that's again product, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's the e-commerce operations, just being sensitive and aware that if you pick up on it, that people in the room might be giving the body language that they feel like they're not being heard, or that maybe they just have a personality trait where they don't speak up and share. Like, you as a leader can do a lot to help by almost playing moderator, or being able to sensitive to those things to make sure that you step in and say, hey, ask that person, like, did you have anything to say, and try and foster this kind of open environment, no bad ideas kind of situation. Because I think a lot of the inclusivity or feeling excluded doesn't get communicated back to HR or to anybody else. It's what people take home alone. So just kind of being more sensitive to that, I think, can go a long way.
True. Like, we take home more those memories than that of like working back and like bouncing back with 2x speed, or maybe 2x, like double the thought process, or streamlining the things. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good tip that I think we all would love to carry forward and like fit in our mind, so that next time if it happens, so then we try to like bloom from that instead of like dooming from that.
Yeah. And sometimes when you're hired to do a job and to, analyze something and to tell a client what's wrong, it can be very intimidating, right? Especially for women. We do want to be agreeable and put good vibes out there. So it can be intimidating to deliver feedback as well.
Yes, agree. Do you look for any female personality in this field?
Well, I can say who, like, I was initially very much inspired for. There was a woman in this industry who I think has been out of the game for a long time. I'm sure she's still on this earth, but I think she probably out there living her best life. Anne Holland. So she used to run Marketing Sherpa, and then she sold that at some point to Marketing Experiments. But just going back to that like late 2000s era of who were the voices that were really pushing forward, like, hey, now you've got tools and you can do experiments. I'd say she was one of the pioneers. And one thing that like really stuck with me there, like part of her philosophy was, you'd start with optimizing the checkout if it's e-commerce, because that's the people who are closest to conversion. So if you can take that checkout completion from X to Y, then that's going to be a lot more impactful than chasing like things on the homepage or earlier up on in the journey. I think that's kind of changed a little bit now, where Shopify has been like quite tight. I mean, it's kind of a Shopify world in e-commerce in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
we kind of locked down that checkout. So everyone had to move to, testing other things earlier in the funnel. And now that's kind of changing more to where now the checkout is getting a little bit more open and more flexible. But she really influenced me a lot. And I had the privilege of having some interactions with her personally as well, which I treasure dearly.
That's good. That's good. Like, at least you have like inspiration, and will have your inspiration as well in future. But yes, like some
Yeah, and
inspiration definitely carve our journey.
Yeah, she was really influential, but that's not to say that there's not a lot of inspiring people today. I definitely want to shout out Lucia Vandenbrink because she started the Slack community for women in CRO. So that takes a lot of like passion and effort in and around her own job to like build that. That's a dedicated effort. So if any women out there want to join that community, it's a really great Slack group to share and encourage. And even there's a lot of like opening doors for opportunities for speaking engagements and webinars and stuff. We're always sharing those opportunities with each other.
That's great. That's great. At least it would help spread the word and awareness and like involve like-minded speakers and encourage them to speak more and share their learnings. Can you share any e-commerce trend that businesses should definitely leverage in 2024?
Well, it's 2024, so the default answer everyone's going to say is AI, right? That's a big trend.
It's true.
I mean, in this last week, so as the time that we're recording, Amazon just launched or announced that they have this Rufus AI assistant, and Shopify and Google both are trying to, get this whole chatbot guided selling kind of thing. And the way that I think about it is it's so far off from those algorithms actually being usefully trained and it really working that I think that most brands and retailers should sit this one out and let the big companies make all the mistakes and, work out the wrinkles in this kind of thing. Because even like on LinkedIn is, those articles where they ask you to kind of, can you contribute to this AI
Yes.
written down and all that kind of stuff. And now I notice that they're putting it into their little chat bot. So if you click on somebody's post, it kind of summarizes it and then tries to branch off into, like, let's take you down another rabbit hole of like this topic and breaking down. And it's like, okay, so that whole article feeding thing that's been going on for months has all been about this chatbot, and it's not really good. The user experiences that I've tested on these sites are just not really good. But that doesn't mean that AI can't be useful on the back end. Like if you're using AI within your personalization tools or with your conversion optimization tools, there's going to be more and more generative stuff out of your Photoshop and out of your no-code tools and stuff. So I think those are good trends to kind of get at least your hands dirty and play around with them and get to know the tools. But the front end stuff I would leave for probably 3 to 5 years.
I think great learning as well. And yeah, as you mentioned, like on LinkedIn, we often see those stuff coming up. But yes, not always it's fruitful. At times it would be, but yes, we can use it in different way, at least leveraging AI for refurbishing our ideas or maybe like trying to build a stronger hypothesis as well. When, like you mentioned, skill set and the soft skill would matter a lot. So maybe that's how somewhere we can interconnect. But yes, like align with your thoughts like on the AI as well. Any advice that you would
It's really funny. I mean, you talk about AI hallucinating and stuff like that, and it's not really human. I recently got one of those things on LinkedIn, like, would you contribute to this article? And it made no sense. I had to read it like 10 times. I'm like, this makes no sense. It was like, you're a PPC manager that is, blah, 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 responsible for driving all these things. How do you choose an email marketing program? I'm like, those two things are not even anywhere near each other. If you're running PPC, you're not automating emails from your PPC campaign.
Yes, it never meets, like those ends never meet, but still it's like being selected. So yes, that happens. Like we often receive those invitations that you have been selected, but by the time we read it, it becomes, oh my God.
And that's why it's a little bit scary to think about the prospect that this is coming to CRO tools as well, is that, like I think it's kind of goes a little bit back to the self-driving car versus driving a car. I think we all got into the industry because we like analyzing and we like making decisions. And I think the tools, are going to need to build in features that make our lives easier, but where it gets into the self-executing or the self-decision making, I don't know how close or far we are away from that. I think a lot of us are going to want to keep, doing the fun stuff as humans.
Yeah. Definitely, we would want to also have human intelligence in place and like continue to have that no matter how big AI goes in future.
Yeah, I think the tools are going to help amplify people and help us be more productive, but we need to keep the empathy and the human experience front and center.
Right, right. Any advice that you would want to give to others who are like interested in pursuing a career in like conversion rate optimization?
Yeah, it's a super exciting field, and I'm glad to see that a lot of people like that is their title now, where it used to be, where it was just kind of a little seed of an industry. I think one day it could be as big as SEO. So yeah, I definitely think this is something where you need to be two things: always self-educating and always following a few different branches. So if you can follow somebody in SEO, so that's going to help you. I think I kind of already answered this question earlier.
Yeah.
I feel like fumbling.
No worries. I think that's great thing. Like yes, as you mentioned, it's just a seed, and we need to grow its branches in future, and we need to continue nurturing those branches as well, so that it grows as big as a tree in near future. I think we had a fantastic discussion so far with Linda, and now it's our time to switch gears and enter our rapid fire round. This is where I'll put some quick questions your way and would love to hear your spontaneous answers. All right, we'll get it started. Three apps that you cannot live without.
Notion, because I'm building my website in that. So wish me luck. Definitely Gmail. I guess LinkedIn. I'm having a lot of fun on LinkedIn.
Yes, we want to add two more, Instagram and WhatsApp.
You know what? I am very much not a social media person outside of like what I do for my job, because I feel like I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So I find like those things are like super distracting. So I'm rarely on Instagram or Facebook or any other app.
That's good. That's good to keep this aside. If a movie was made on your life, what would the title be?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I don't know.
Would you want it to be made on like how you spent your or how you're spending your life or how you grew from a child to like into this field and what inspired you and somewhere around that?
Well, I think it would be a movie that not very many people would want to watch. I think it would be very boring because it's, like I'm pretty focused on work and, like the things that are going on in my head. So I think that it would be the world's most boring movie. It would be like a lot of me in my apartment behind a computer cranking out work, and it wouldn't be a lot, a lot of too much adventure. So maybe the world's most, the world's biggest sleep snooze
Oh,
button. I call it snooze button. But also
oh,
like
but
being
the
a
name
freelance.
would be exciting. Maximum of them would want to see that out.
I just watched the movie Groundhog Day with my nephew and the family, on Groundhog Day. And it was kind of like you do the same day over and over, but you make little micro tweaks to it to kind of optimize it. I feel like my day is very similar every day, but I think as a person, you're always trying to, optimize it a little bit more every single time you repeat the day.
True, right. And one thing that you would like to change about the CRO industry.
I think sometimes conversion optimization can kind of sometimes lose sight of the fact that product management is slightly different function. Not absolutely everything can be A/B tested. You would simply not get anything done. So there does need to be gut feel and the hippo in the room that often gets, speared and like mocked, that there might be, somebody that's making a decision that doesn't get an A/B test. But that's the reality of stuff. I mean, you've got to pick one. If you're data driven all day, all the time, you are going to fall into that trap of testing safe, low hanging fruit, or you would call it low hanging fruit, but really what it is easy. And easy doesn't move the needle or evolve your digital product. You have to take bigger risks. You have to look at a bigger picture. And sometimes that means shipping things that didn't get a formal A/B test. The other part of it is I think that CRO needs to understand that sometimes an experiment has biases in it because of the virtue of you picked a variant or an implementation that if you had tested it again with a different implementation or even a different design or some other different variable within that test, the outcome could have been wildly different. And that means that sometimes you take a learning because, yay, we have the test and here's the data, and then you wipe your hands of it and you want to move on, right? Because you want to get through a whole backlog of tests and you don't want to like keep retesting something into oblivion that that you said the data, proves otherwise. But there's so many things left on the table that didn't get tested. And I recently posted something about this because I think about these kind of things late at night. But like, if you were run an ABCD test, right? Yeah, that's going to stretch your test sometimes into a very long duration or whatever reason. We like to do A/B tests and get it done quickly and move on. But an ABCD test can be really telling because you'll see one variant, win on a certain KPI and not on another. Or you might see one variant that you might not have included in the original A/B test. But when you line them all up together, then you see like, oh, it's surprising. This particular configuration of stuff won. And that's a lot better than doing an A/B test and going, okay, like let's pick another one and A/B test this again with B and D head to head or whatever. Like you're just not going to get the same data. So I think that CRO is just not perfect. There is a lot of, as much as you want to call it data driven, there's a lot of heuristics and there's a lot of like decisions that have to be made. And there's going to be a lot of debate, like we talked about before, where sometimes ideas get pushed back or pushed completely off the table and never get tested. And you just really can't always know. So that's kind of a thing that I would want to change about CRO is maybe just a little bit more open-mindedness that the data that we get from the tests is there's nuance around it.
Right. And definitely we should have reiteration and plan. Otherwise, it might just happen, like you said, that it's just like raising hands up and then like moving further.
Mm-hmm.
Then what's the most random fact you know by heart?
Random fact. Oh, wow. Okay. So this was an influential fact. I don't know if it's so much of a fact, but I used to watch Full House as a kid. And there was an episode where DJ she said that meat stays in your stomach for 6 hours. And I thought that was absolutely disgusting. That just gave me the little something in my head. And I went vegan for a while. I felt it. But that's a weird random fact, and I'm not vegan anymore, but I mean that's a little random fact that sometimes you pick up these little things from like TV shows as a kid and then you just never forget them.
That's true. Any guilty pleasure TV show or movie?
Oh yeah, I like Selling Sunset. I love that show. But actually I take that back because I wish it was more about the pretty houses. It's right now the last few seasons have just been a lot of like arguing and drama, and they've tried to center the drama. So I don't know if I can take another season of it, but I would absolutely love, I would love to see a reality show that's just about selling gazillion-dollar houses and make it just focused on the inner workings of maybe more about like what makes a good sale and, the negotiation part of it or the actual lived experience of realtors would fascinate me.
I did follow some of those episodes, yes, and it's good from learning standpoint. How do people sell, and what are your requirements in actual, and what do people do when they are actually trying to buy when they have choices? So yes, even I have like seen in past, but it seems to be like very good and interesting as well, like quite engaging.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of this, you would never see the inside of one of these bougie houses otherwise, right? So you get a little peek.
And sometimes the designs are so innovative and like interesting as well. That also helps pick our brains that, okay, this we could have done in our own house as well.
Yeah.
And if you had a podcast, who would be the first person you'd want to invite on the show?
Oh, I would try and find where Anne Holland is these days. And I'd want to ask her what she's been doing since she left the marketing space.
Yes. And three books that you would recommend to our listener. You already recommended one, but any three you would want to recommend our listeners?
Oh, well, you know what? I read so much more online than I do reading books. Yeah, but like I have a few faves that are longstanding. Like I love all the Baymart Institute books. I don't know if they make the print versions anymore, but I have some of like the old like 600. Those are like some of my most treasured stuff. But I think that like if you go and pick up like anything that Jacob Nielsen did in like the 2000s, he has this big homepage usability book, or his first, I think it was 2001, he published this book that you can still get on Amazon of like e-commerce usability. Just the memory lane of flipping through and seeing what websites used to look like back in the day, like 2000s era, is such like a coffee table book experience. And I think those are really fun. And especially if you're in this space on the web, you know, it's nice to see how far we've come. And today's books and today's blogs and stuff are going to be tomorrow's, you know, fossils. So yeah, I think those are a lot of fun.
Any one superpower that you'd like to have?
Ooh, superpower. I would love turbocharged productivity.
Yes, I think then it would like people would want to like steal that power from you.
Yeah. Like one thing that I envy about AI is that it's just able to take in so much more data and, you know, connect the dots so much more. I feel like I'm doing that in a very analog way.
Any one goal or dream you would like to achieve in next 3 years?
I don't know, because honestly, I'd like to retire in 3 years. That's a very impossible dream, but I think about it every day.
Oh, that's also a good thing. Like you'll plan well.
Stop working. That's my goal. I'm working so hard so I can stop.
So, like you also had your like publication in Forbes. So any great learning like you'd want to share around that because you had like contributed to the publications in Forbes. So any learning from that?
Well, I can tell you that like back when I was blogging a lot, I was on a ton of media lists, and I would get like sometimes like really exciting, people want to interview you and all that kind of stuff. Oh, my tip is that if anybody approaches you with that, like reply immediately because they ain't gonna wait. Okay. So I've lost opportunities on like, you know, some really cool things. I was like, oh, I was this close to like being on, I'm not even gonna say it, but yeah, so definitely if a reporter reaches out to you, if you do media or you have a LinkedIn or whatever, like you got to get back to them ASAP. Like if you're in the middle of a meeting, get back to them ASAP because they will move on if you don't reply immediately. So the publications that I did get interviewed for during that time, you know, those were ones where I was responsive or they really, really wanted to talk to me. But that's just my tip and my learning there on getting covered by media.
That's good. That's good piece of advice for others as well who are planning to get covered.
Yeah.
Yes. Linda, it was great speaking to you. And like, I think here comes an end to the episode of our podcast, at least for the Women in CRO discussion.